Hi
Hello.
Mackenzie, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. How's your day going?
Pretty good. Just wrapping it up with an ArtEvolve. Just looking forward to that.
Exactly, yeah, I'm excited. I've just been looking
Yeah,
through the prep doc, so it should be all good
fabulous.
to go. I've got it open on my screen as well in case we need to kind of refer to it at any point or anything, but it should all be
Yeah,
fine.
I'll probably pop in and out of there, but I'm sure, Emma said I'll also kind of do some follow-ups for the different topics and
Yeah. How does
yeah.
it work? So when we get the questions in, do they usually type questions and we can see them on a board and then answer them? Or
Yeah.
okay,
Yeah, so
perfect.
typically sometimes they'll put them in the comments as we go through, and I'll
Hmm.
like kind of bring up ideas if it's relevant to something we're speaking about at the moment. If they have sort of more Q&A questions, then there's actually a section at the bottom
Yeah,
where they can put them, and then we'll be able to see them afterwards, just
fantastic.
to go through. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it. It should be good. Do we know how many people we've got signed up?
let's see. I don't think I checked the final count. We already have a couple people hanging out in here. Hi,
Ah,
Heather. Hi, Naomi. Let's see. Oh, a lot.
perfect.
118.
Wow,
Yeah,
that's good.
good.
So I can't see who we've got on the call yet. I think that's fine, though, isn't it? I don't really need to say anything as long as
No,
it's, you can
no.
see questions popping up. I'll open
Yeah,
it up.
so normally once we start to have a few more people, I'll kind of shout out and they'll start to introduce themselves in the comments. And we typically have at
Perfect.
least 3 continents represented at each ArtEvolve. So
Amazing. Even better.
yeah,
I think it's going to be an interesting topic with kind of everything that's going on this week as well. So
yeah,
it's well timed.
it is very well timed. Yeah, and then I think the next one that Annika and I are going to do together is because she's at COP26 right now,
Okay.
presenting, and so we're going to kind of do um, a a rundown of the event and thoughts and kind of how things went. So
Amazing. I think
yeah.
there's just so much we can do that it's just like a never ending ambition to kind of try and keep, actually getting a step closer to being as environmentally friendly as possible because there's like so much more we can be doing,
Yeah, I
which is
know.
such a challenge, isn't it? But I think as long as everyone's making those little steps in the right direction as quickly as they can do, then I think that's all we can ask at this stage,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
the main thing.
Well, I think the nice thing too is that like to be able to kind of have that power to do it from the company side rather than the individual
Definitely.
side makes a much bigger impact, right? Than you
It
just
does. It allows you
recycling at
to
home.
move with pace, I think, doesn't it? When you kind of
Yeah.
implement something as a company, it's just, I mean, we've definitely found that with kind of what we've done, but we'll touch on it in a little bit. But
Hmm.
I think it's just making it easy for everyone if a company does it.
Yeah.
It's kind of making those changes uh, just much more easy to kind of initiate if you've got someone there like leading the way and kind of making those changes for you rather than an individual trying to figure out what's the best way forward and kind of all of those kind of questions that maybe they haven't answered if they've got an organization that's just doing it already.
Yeah.
And it's just an easier choice, then that's much better, isn't it? So,
Hmm. Yeah. Rather than kind of having to forge that path as a consumer.
mm-hmm. Emma said hi. Hi, Emma.
Yeah. So just make sure if you want to comment during, just switch your little chat box. It's automatically set to only talk to us. So
Okay.
if you switch it to all panelists and attendees, then it'll allow you to write messages to other people. If anything comes up in the middle and you need to kind of ping me, you can also write me directly if you need to.
Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. So I can see host and panelists, everyone, hello Articheck, which is you, and then Emma. Okay, exactly. So I'll click on everyone for now, so hopefully you can see that's coming through.
And I'll just give people a little bit of time. We normally start like a couple minutes after the hour, just so everyone gets a chance to come in.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Everyone in the UK will be wrapping up for the day, hopefully just by now. So it's a nice way to finish a Thursday.
Yeah. Well, it was like, we just, it's the only time that we could do that. We could actually get like everything from the West Coast of the US.
Yeah.
To us. Yeah. But we've had a couple webinars, some of our like more popular ones, which a lot of them were about kind of like virtual courier things. And we had people tuning in like in the middle of the night from Hong Kong, Singapore. Like, you guys can watch the recording.
Yeah. Wow.
What are you doing?
If it's a topic you're interested in, then you get up in the middle of the night to listen about it. Great.
Yeah, I know.
That's really good. It's nice, I think, having it at this time as well, especially when you're in the UK, because otherwise you kind of get lost in the day, don't you? And you've kind of got lots going on, whereas this time potentially you probably have a little bit more free. We run a few events for our clients at the same time, and I think 5 o'clock is definitely the optimal time for them. It just seems to work best.
And same in Europe, because our dinner time is a bit later, so 6 o'clock is about right, because dinner's like 7:38.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
Emma, you're commenting to panelists only, just so you know, if you wanted to switch your settings. Hello, everyone who's joined us so far. Feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. Tell us who you are, where you're from, organization, location, city, state, country, continent, whatever you would like to share.
Someone from the US.
Hi, Patricia. Nice to see you.
Hello. I think we've got 118 people, you said, joining us today. So
RSVP'd, yeah. Okay. So some of them, sometimes people RSVP as well because they won't be able to make it, but they want the recording. So it'll be a mixture. But
great.
Yeah. Hi, Allison. How are you?
Hi, Allison. Hi, Eric.
Cologne. Lovely.
Are you from Cologne?
Hi, Anna.
Hi, Anna.
Anyone is welcome to introduce themselves in the comments as people continue to trickle in. Probably give everyone a chance to join in and start a few minutes after 6 my time, 5 James's time. See, no, it's different this week. 1 p.m. New York time.
Because of daylight saving, yeah, throws everything off slightly.
I have had like 2 appointments this week where we were off by like an hour each other. Can never be avoided, can it?
Naomi from London, Cassidy. Lots of people joining us.
It just dark at 6 in the evening. Yes.
I know, it feels like winter now. I think it's in the last like 3 or 4 days here in London. It's suddenly gone really cold. But yeah, can't complain, can we?
Yeah, I always feel like in this particular, I'm in like one of the offices in our house, and this one has a really large heater for the size of the room. So I always feel like I'm in short sleeves even throughout the winter. Everyone's like, where are you? Like, is it warm? No.
It's cold.
Just this room.
Everyone in our office was joking with me because I was desperate for it to become winter and be cold and crisp and have like big winter coats and things. And then as soon as it came, I was kind of regretting that decision and I wanted it to be sunny again. But, oh well.
Yeah. So say hello in the comments. Hi, Julia from Horniman. Welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Where are you coming from? Country, continent, institution, if you'd like to shout out. We love the shout outs.
Got a nice mix of locations so far by the looks of it.
Mm-hmm. I'm freezing in Cambridgeshire. Oh no, Deborah.
Hi, Marnie.
Nice. Okay, well, I'm probably going to launch into my spiel, and then
Okay.
we'll get started with our things. So, hello everybody, and welcome to ArtEvolve. It's nice to see all of you. We've been, Annika and I have been switching back and forth, but today it's me, and as some of you may know, I'm Mackenzie, CCO of Articheck. And today I have with us James, am I going to say this right? Quirk?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, great. James Quirk, who's the lead marketing manager at Queen's Fine Art. Hi, James.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I don't know if you want me to give you a little background into myself and Queen's, but I'm happy to do so if you need. Yeah, so I am, as Mackenzie kindly mentioned, I am the lead marketing manager at Queen's. So we are a London-based fine art shipping and specialist logistics provider. We work specifically with kind of galleries, museums, private clients, collectors. Probably a lot of you are on the call as well. A lot of our clients, I think, pre-registered as well, which is fantastic. But we are based in Fitzrovia, London, and then, like many of the other fine art agents, operate fully internationally, working with kind of a select partner agents out in all the major art hubs. I joined Queen's about a year ago now, so kind of in the midst of the pandemic, but pretty exciting time to join Queen's. And I think I've always been passionate about trying to create brands and kind of companies that are also a force for good, as well as kind of serving our clients to the best of their ability. So when I joined, it was very high on my agenda to make sure we were pushing through our kind of environmental agenda and really trying to get things right. I think we're on the journey to doing that. I don't think we're fully there yet, but we're definitely making good headway. So that's me, and that's Queen's.
That's great to hear. So today's topic is officially how to calculate your organization's environmental footprint. So we're going to be talking about a lot of aspects of that, and things to do and things maybe not to do, and why. And so we're going to go into all sorts of angles. So what I'm first going to do is just pull up our poll, because I think that's a great way to kick us off. All right, so go ahead, everybody. Today's poll is this: is your organization planning an environmental audit? Okay, so our options are: we have recently reviewed our environmental footprint, yes, it's in process, yes, soon, or we're definitely interested in doing one, not sure, or no. And if your answer is no, it'd be great to hear why. Is it something that's not been prioritized? Maybe you don't have the bandwidth, or feel like your team doesn't have the bandwidth to do one. So that would be great to kind of get your feedback on that. And those who have one in process, I'm sure you'll have a lot to contribute to our conversation today. So feel free to pop in the comments and give your thoughts or questions.
I'm really interested to see the results on this one, actually, to see how many people have already done it and versus how many are doing it. I think it seems like there's been a lot more conversation recently about kind of the importance of doing kind of carbon audits and understanding where you stand now. So you can then start making changes more effectively. So it'd be great to see.
So let's see, everyone has answered. I'm gonna end the poll now. So last licks, anybody? Okay, so just save this. It looks like most of you say yes, happening soon, or we are interested. So you're in the right place, I think, for us to be talking about this today. Some of you have it in process, which is wonderful. And then some of you have said no. So, I look forward to kind of hearing about that and what the barriers are to doing an audit. Don't know where to start. Let's see, a couple of people have said, Marnie says, not sure where to start. No audit planned, Eric says, but hoping this program helps us to learn what data we should be collecting. And then Deborah says it's a massive organizational effort. Yes, it can be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll eventually spread through the whole org, but we can't do it all at the same time as we're all siloed. Yeah, I can understand that. Yeah, that can be an issue. So yeah, we'll talk about some of those things today, I'm sure. So just to give a bit of background here, right? Earlier this year, Queens joined the Gallery Climate Coalition, which is also the same one that we, Articheck, participated with at Frieze London. And Queens worked to complete a carbon audit and build a climate reduction plan with the aim of reducing Queens' carbon footprint by 50% by 2030, right? In line with the Paris Accord goals. So James, can you talk us through this process a little bit? First off, how does an art organization begin reviewing its environmental footprint?
Yeah, so for us, it was definitely a lengthy process. It took a lot of planning before we could even begin to get to actually starting completing the audit. And I think something that was key for me, and this was before I kind of investigated joining the Gallery Climate Coalition, but it was trying to gather as much information from as many different parties as possible as to what the best way to kind of tackle, because it's a big challenge, but tackle our environmental footprint would be. Because I think there's so much information out there, it's kind of quite scary sometimes to try and disseminate what it is you should actually be doing, what has the biggest effect. So at Queen's, we spoke to about probably five or six different organizations about kind of creating carbon audits and kind of what information you needed to pull. And those weren't specific necessarily to the art industry. And I think the challenge that we had with some of those companies that we spoke to, as much as they had really good methodology and often quite robust platforms for completing carbon audits, they often, obviously they're a company in their own right, so they charged to help complete the carbon audits. And the cost to bring someone like that or one of those companies involved for us was prohibitive. It just wasn't possible for us to sink that amount of money into doing a carbon audit. And it also became quite apparent, I think it was something that we were able to do ourselves if we dedicated the time to it. So at that point, I then reached out to the Gallery Climate Coalition. Hannah, I don't know whether Hannah's on the call today, from Thomas Dane. She was my first kind of contact. And then I was put in touch through Hannah with someone I know the Gallery Climate Coalition work very regularly with, called Danny Shivers. And Danny was amazing in helping me kind of understand what it was we actually really wanted to do. I had lots of questions around offsetting, which I think we'll probably touch on in a little bit, and whether offsetting was the right thing or not, because I saw also when we were having questions about it, the Gallery Climate Coalition were also trying to maybe steer people away from just resorting to offsetting. So I worked with Danny, had quite a few calls with him to understand what information we needed to collect, and then how best to collect that information and then transfer that into something that we could understand and use. And that's when Danny pointed me in the direction of the pretty amazing, I'm sure lots of people on the call have used it, calculator on the GCC's website. And for me, that was the most simple to use and user-friendly tool that any of the companies that we spoke to had shown us. And that was quite attractive because obviously we decided to go down the route of us actually completing our own carbon audit. So once I then had a few calls with Danny to understand that, it was then down to collecting the information we needed, which was the scary bit. We are an organization that has been growing very quickly. For the last kind of 4 years, we've kind of grown exponentially, which is fantastic, but also meant that a lot of the advice was to not use your data from the pandemic year, because a lot of businesses actually saw their business declining during the pandemic. We were actually in the lucky position that we didn't, but that also meant that if we went back to the year before the pandemic, all the information we would have collected wouldn't have been reflective as to where we were as a business now. We had a larger storage facilities. We were completing more estimates, more quotes, sending more shipments abroad. So it wasn't really an option for us to do that, which is why we then decided to do a carbon audit based on a defined period, within the pandemic year that we were operating in, which was our most up-to-date business period. And then that we did it on a kind of a 3-monthly basis with a view that we'd review that at the end of this year and do a full year. So because we did the 3-month kind of breakup of our carbon audit, we then also added in an extra month into that as almost a buffer to account for our growth, which I think was quite important for us because we were growing at a rate where it wouldn't have been fair and it wouldn't have been reflective of us kind of doing a carbon audit on where we currently stood, because in a few months' time, the likelihood is that isn't where we would have been operating. So we did that. We then kind of, in order to do that, we had to collect information on every single shipment we had completed, which luckily for us, obviously we're maybe in a slightly better position than maybe some of the galleries, but because logistics is what we do and we have information on every single shipment at the
logistics database.
Yeah, that was surprisingly quite easy for us because we already have an internal file system that enabled us to pull out everything from where the shipment was collected, where it was going, the weight of the shipment, the size, what it included. But that's the information you need.
So before we dive into kind of those aspects, which I'm very interested in, I'd love to hear if we have, kind of going back to talking about the Gallery Climate Coalition and their calculator that you ended up using to do your own audit. I'd love to, anyone here who is either with GCC or is a member of GCC, feel free to say hello in the comments. So you can get to know each other. Maybe you can connect with each other and, talk a little bit and collaborate a little bit. So feel free to shout out in the comments. Just remember that you want to click on to and then not send your message to all panelists, but all panelists and attendees. What logistics database do you use?
So that was our own internal systems. So it wasn't an external database, I'm afraid. We have basically our own in-house platform. So my advice to kind of institutions and galleries was reach out to your logistics partners because they will have all of that information. We have provided that to a lot of our clients already. It does take a bit of time for your logistics partners to pull through that information because obviously it's kind of an additional requirement. It's not something that we charge for at all to kind of pull that. And I don't think many other shipping companies do or should be charging for that because I think we've all got a responsibility to try and help everyone kind of find this information. But yeah, just reach out to your shipping partners and they should have that.
Great. So I think a lot of institutions as well probably have that same problem that you were talking about with the pandemic. So whether that's to skip that year or to include that year, but only include part of it because they were growing, but obviously not in the same way potentially that they would typically. So, I wonder if that probably applies more to commercial, right? Because, the museums still have all their storage running in the winter or in the winter in the pandemic. I'm really stuck on the winter in my mind. I'm looking outside and it's all dark. But so why did you choose specifically that? You said the 3-month period was the most recent business period, right?
Yeah. So we chose that period because that kind of reflected more accurately kind of any of our other operating periods. So if you look at our kind of years in the run up to the pandemic, we'd been growing at such a rate that basically it wasn't really reflective of how we were currently operating. So we'd got bigger storage facilities, for example. We were completing way more international shipments than we had ever done, even though it was during the pandemic, which some people find quite surprising, but people were still shipping a lot. So for us, that was more accurate than if we'd done a full year period. Even a full year wasn't really representative because if you go, say, for example, 9 months before our 3-month period, our business was a completely different size. So we decided to have that 3 months and then turn that kind of 3-month period and take that, what it would look like if that was a full year, and then add on kind of a month or two at the end that accounted for us growing. I think in the end we opted for an additional month just to try and kind of taken a buffer. And I kind of think with these things, it's always best to err on the worst side of things. So kind of take in the most emissions you could be doing possible, because then even if you've kind of over-egged it slightly, you're only going to be changing things for the better rather than kind of missing things out.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think that kind of means that institutions don't need to wait for a year to pass post-pandemic in order to do these audits, right? There's still ways to do them now, even.
And I think there's definitely always kind of ways around it for us. Like we realized that kind of 3-month period that we took isn't ideal. It's not obviously the best scenario, but I think it was the most accurate way we could do it. And then we're planning on, once we've kind of come out of this year, doing the full year of this year and seeing where that leaves us. And kind of, I think it's a continual process. So for us, we're kind of planning on doing it yearly. That's great. But I think, as much as you can revisit it, I think it should be at the forefront of kind of all of your operations in a way. So it shouldn't be something that you're looking at once a year and then not really thinking about. We've really tried to instill it in everything we do in the office or kind of outside of the office as well. Because it isn't just about completing a carbon audit and leaving it. You kind of got to make sure you're continually working towards the kind of goals and the reduction plans that you made coming out of it.
It's a living document for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So Imogen, I see your question and we're going to get to it right now. So what did the review process consist of? You already mentioned pulling the logistic history and things like that, but what are some other things that you looked at in terms of data?
So we also looked at things like fuel bills, utility bills, and making sure that we were tracking whether we were using green energy suppliers, for example. So in the calculator, you can input kind of everything to do with kind of your utility bills, your fuel bills, and all of that information as well. But then I think that process also allowed us to check that was there anything else we could do? So could we change the light bulbs in our storage facility to be more eco-friendly or energy efficient? And so we kind of collected, it's basically a receipt collecting exercise or an invoice collecting exercise in a way. I would say that for galleries that are trying to get that information, you can, on the utility bills, you can often see kind of like your usage. Exactly, you can input that into the calculator and that will pump out your carbon kind of emissions. If you are lucky, your logistics partner will also be including the carbon emissions now on their shipments. So every invoice or estimate you get from that shipper, depending on who you use, should be including the carbon emissions calculation for that job as well. So that makes it easier for kind of galleries and institutions and clients to track it as well. Yeah, so I think there's a real push for shippers to do that at the moment, and I know quite a few do. We started doing that when we were doing our carbon audit, and I know a lot of shipping companies are now moving that way. So it's a nice way to look at kind of easily what kind of your emissions are from each shipment.
Definitely. So obviously when you're kind of looking at historic data before you started to do that, you had to figure out how to estimate the carbon impact of a move that had happened, in the past. How did you do that?
We obviously every single case size is different, and you've got kind of heavier crates and you've got kind of where they have kind of 1 or 2 artworks in a crate, or you've got 1 artwork. So that for us was quite challenging to actually sit down, especially in the team that we were in. From a pure kind of team resource point of view, the time that would take to pull all of that information was pretty labor intensive. So the plan that we came up with Danny was actually to create a almost like our own kind of template of assumptions that was a small shipment, a medium-sized shipment, a large, and then that be for kind of artworks, sculptures, and kind of so on, that we would then be able to, when we're kind of filling in the calculator, we'd be able to use that information. So I guess to make that slightly clearer, we would work out what the carbon emissions would be on average for a small shipment that included 1 art that was crated versus 1 art that was card packed, and work it out that way, rather than having the exact carbon emissions for every single different size of anything you could possibly ship. That just wasn't going to work for us. So we kind of had a few assumptions that we worked with our warehouse team to kind of work out what the rough sizes of those shipments would be and the weights and things, and then use the calculator to help us make those assumptions as well.
Yeah, I think it's really important when you're doing this type of work to know when to go into detail and when to not.
Yeah.
Right. In terms of actually effectively completing an audit.
Yeah, I think you have to be pragmatic as well, because I'm assuming a lot of people on this call won't have environmental teams to kind of complete these audits for them. We definitely didn't. So I think it's about understanding what information that you feel comfortable and you feel accurately represents kind of your operations. And you've got to be honest with yourself as well that, you're not going to be able to pull every single ounce of information, but as long as you're getting as much as you possibly can, then that's a better result than also not doing a carbon audit at all and not making any progress.
Yeah.
Or at least in my view, some people might disagree, but I think it's definitely a step in the right direction.
Done is better than perfect, I think is what we like to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see, Imogen also mentioned computers. So did you look into like server storage and things like that?
So we looked into our electricity usage within our offices, storage facilities, and then also had a calculation in for like home working as well. But it also became apparent just from our conversations that things like in your emails having like attachments and cloud-based storage and all of those kind of other elements that maybe you wouldn't think of also have an impact. So I would also say, I feel like I may be going on a lot about the GCC, but they also have a really useful guide on what to include or what to think about when thinking about like your digital operations. So it was that was quite useful because it could advise you, for example, to make sure you're not attaching large documents and compressing them rather than attaching a huge file. Actually, it's much more energy efficient to compress the file, for example. So yeah, I would again refer to the Gallery Climate Coalition for that because they've got some great resources.
Yeah, I think that's something that, even before you can do the audit, something that you can do as an individual in a company is just actually delete your email inbox. Don't archive it. Just actually delete things.
Yeah. And I know that I've seen another question come in about waste. So we are lucky we work with a company that manages our waste for us. And there are a lot of companies that you can choose that kind of manage waste. We have one that has full recycling capabilities as well. And we pay them basically on the weight of those different what's the word? Almost like a crate for each of those different types of waste, but that isn't the exact word. I can't remember what it's called, but that was basically made it really easy for us to calculate how much we were putting into waste versus how much we were able to recycle. And I guess depending on your organization, I'm sorry, I can't see which organization you're from, but it was quite easy for us to actually see exactly the tonnage of materials that we were recycling versus the tonnage that unfortunately were going to waste. So that was quite transparent for us.
Yeah. And I think Eliana is also mentioning organics. So I know this is a big question for conservators, right? Is what to do with the materials used, right, during conservation, post-conservation. And so therefore the actual conservation process is affected a lot by this. And we had, let's see, Lean from ePark talked a bit about this, I think in a webinar last year. So if anyone's interested about that, you can take a look. It's about environmentally friendly conservation. But yeah, what about organics?
So I think that again depends on your company that you're using to obviously help you with your waste. It's probably a bit more of an in-depth answer that I guess we could refer to kind of after the call, but I would refer to making sure that the company that you're working with knows the best way to kind of handle those organic materials when you're disposing of them or repurposing them, for example. Yeah,
I feel like a lot of institutions really need to rely on their partners for some of this.
Yeah, right? I think for us it was quite a nice exercise because we were reaching out to people in our our company that we use for our waste, to actually learn a little bit more about it or see what that included, because we didn't even know that some of the things that we maybe thought that weren't recyclable actually could be put in our recyclable container and were perfectly able to be recycled. So actually then that was an immediate win, just because we were sourcing more information and we didn't have to do anything differently other than put it in a different container.
Well, yeah.
So that was, yeah, I'd say definitely work with as many of your suppliers as possible.
So if you actually, sorry, I just saw another comment. Eric says carbon equivalents for conservation exhibit functions can also be calculated on the stick cultural heritage site. Awesome. Thanks, Eric, for sharing that. So, speaking of kind of things that you learned as you did the review, let's talk a little bit more about kind of what came out of doing the climate review, what you learned.
So for us, and it probably isn't surprising, we're a shipping and logistics company. So 95% of our emissions came from what we do as the core part of our business. So that's shipping works internationally, but also our local movements as well. Local was obviously much less than kind of air freight. So our air freight movements were contributing to the vast majority of our emissions. But also, interestingly, our storage facility generated, I think it was only 1.99% of our total emissions. So that was much smaller than we were expecting. And I think that's because it's an incredibly energy efficient facility. So actually, the energy required to keep that facility in the manner that is required wasn't actually a huge amount. So that was quite positive. But I think something we really learned early on was that our packaging needed work, as did, I think, it just maybe shone the light on it a little bit more, but the packaging for the whole art industry is not great, and probably not surprising anyone on the call by saying that. So that was definitely an eye-opener for us. We kind of knew, well, we did know it wasn't the best, but I think when you start looking at it in depth, you realize quite how much work you need to do on your packaging. So that was a big learning for us. But also, I think we kind of learned about the cost impact of making these changes. So if you look at packaging, for example, we have lots of materials that we can switch to. So one example would be polythene film, and there's a fantastic biodegradable version out there that is suitable in a lot of circumstances, not all, because we've also got to make sure, we've got to protect the artworks as well. So we found another alternative. It was fantastic for a lot of the uses. And then we looked into the cost, and it was 5 times more expensive. So then there's the trade-off that you make. Do you swallow that as a business, or do you pass that as an option onto your client? Or is that cost prohibitive and you can't do that and you've got to look for another solution? So I'd say they were a lot of challenges. But also the ability to test these materials. We can't take any chances with the artworks that we're handling, and it would be wrong to do so. So we've also got to make sure that we have a program in place, and we're lucky that our warehouse team have 20 plus years of experience, so they kind of know what they're doing, but they've also got to feel comfortable using these new materials that they've never used before. So it's a bit of an educational piece, I guess, with your team as well, around accepting the use of new materials and making them comfortable with them, teaching them when they can't use them, and allowing them to test them for themselves. I think our technicians are fantastic, but they like to know exactly what materials they're using. That they often recommend materials to clients. So we have to make sure that we trust those materials and that they're the best materials we can offer. So some materials we're testing out right now to make sure, like if they're biodegradable, for example, they don't biodegrade too quickly, because you don't want something to be on a shipment and then it start biodegrading. That is 100% not what you want. So I think it's probably a bit of an educational piece. And I guess our 2 biggest learnings were packaging needed a lot of work, and secondly, you've got to keep educating your workforce and yourselves, because it's a change in mindset completely. And thinking about what you can and can't swap out. Sorry. Sometimes the cost is a factor that, unfortunately, until we all start changing and moving towards it, or all maybe club in and do a bulk order of this, I don't know, there's lots of options, then you might not be able to make those changes as quickly as you want.
Yeah, yeah. So let's see, Cassidy says, how long did the data collection process take?
So that took, so because we did the 3 months and because we had a lot of the logistics information already, it probably took us about a month in total. And that's also taking into account kind of collecting all the utility kind of bills, the energy bills, all of that kind of information. And I would say that's excluding all the research we did in the run up. Mm-hmm. If you probably take from kind of start of when we thought, do we want to do something with carbon or our environmental plan versus here's our carbon reduction plan, that full process was probably 3 months, I would say, off the top of my head. Mm-hmm. But I think, is Cassidy saying, okay, so for a small art logistics company,
interspersed with other projects, right?
Yeah, I'd say that, yeah, you could do it interspersed with other projects within a month or two.
Yeah, but I think that's probably a shorter timeline than a lot of people expect.
Yeah, so. And it depends how much time you want to dedicate to it, and also how granular you want to go, because some people might not feel comfortable doing our kind of assumptions with the different sizes of shipments versus sculpture versus art. Some people might want the specifics, and if they have the bandwidth to do that, then fantastic. Just unfortunately, we didn't. Yeah,
well, I mean, I think even if you have less bandwidth than you do, James, right? Mm-hmm. If an organization wants to do even sort of a more generalized audit, mm-hmm. it's still a starting point, right? It's still a measurement of where you are now that you can then reduce mm-hmm. with effort.
And you can even do it in part as well. So you could look at, okay, we're going to do a packaging audit now, and we're going to look at all the materials that we use, and we're going to evaluate those. And that can be its own project in its own right. And then you move on to, okay, now we're going to look at our energy usage. And you could do it in chunks. If it's something you feel is too big to do all in one go, I don't think it's a bad thing doing it in sections.
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially if you
could assign them in different teams as well. So you could have one person looking at packaging versus one person looking at usage of energy, and go from there.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see. So you created, right, a carbon reduction plan from the learnings of the audit. So what actions have you committed to in that plan?
So number one was our review of packaging, because as part of the carbon audit, there wasn't a process in that to look at our packaging in more depth. So that for us was a big priority, and because that makes up such a large proportion of our waste, that was something and also our clients' waste, that was something we want to kind of make sure we're continually reviewing. So packaging audit kind of number one. Then continually managing our carbon emissions. So making sure that, say for example, actually what we did is in our internal documentation of every single shipment, we now, because we provide the information also to the client, we now actually track the carbon emissions of every single shipment going out, because that's now included on the estimates and the invoices. So that allows us to continually monitor the carbon emissions from the shipment side of things alone. It doesn't include, emissions from our warehouse, but continually monitoring our emissions was also important. And then to start working with our clients to promote more environmentally friendly shipping options. So something that we kind of noticed quite early on was, it's all very well saying you want to be more environmentally friendly, or you want to ship something in the most sustainable way. But a lot of our clients also had the expectation that you could do that and you could maybe explore sea freight, for example, or consolidated transport, but still expect it to be there the next day. And that's just not possible. So working with our clients to understand that actually, if they're saying they need something delivered from London to Paris in 3 days' time, but actually there is a consolidated transport option or a shuttle service going there the next week, do they really, really need it in 3 days' time? Or is it just going to be sat in a storage facility in Paris, and actually it's much more environmentally friendly to consolidate? So that was another thing we took out of our plan, or our carbon reduction plans, to work with our clients to really understand and kind of educate them on how they can help as well. Because it's not just us, it's not just them, we've got to work together. Right. And then separate to that was fostering a greener culture in our office. So we committed to kind of having no single-use plastic in our office at all, and going paperless. So I think we're probably about 90% of the way there going paperless. We do have some paper that is the result of us requiring it for customs documentation, which is slightly frustrating, but we can't change government bodies all in one go. Yes. But we're getting there, and I think we're buying a plant a week for the office, which is quite exciting. Everyone in the office quite likes that. And then I think that was most of the outputs that came from our reduction plan, actually, as well as us committing to actually doing the plan and the audit every year, as well, just to make sure we're continually kind of on track.
That's great. So I'm just curious, in terms of the education, did you release your carbon reduction plan or your audit?
So you can find our carbon reduction plan on our website. I can also share the link for anyone that's interested. I'm sure we can email it out afterwards. But then we've also kind of run sessions as well with our clients and had a few calls with them, specifically the ones we kind of work with most regularly. And we're also, it's a communication thing as well. So, making it clear that there is a shuttle service going from A to B in 2 weeks' time for our clients, because often, I think probably everyone will agree in the art world, there isn't a huge amount of transparency with a lot of these things. So if you can make it as easy as possible for people to make the most environmentally friendly choices, then that, I think, is an easy win. So we've done a few things. I think the calls with clients were quite useful because they taught us a few things and we were able to kind of teach them a few things as well. So it's just a continual learning process, really.
Definitely. Yeah, that collaboration is really key, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Through the whole process.
Yeah, definitely.
So Imogen just quickly has a question of what calculation method did you use to measure emissions for the shipments?
So if you go onto the calculator, you can literally put in where it has, say, for example, we'll use one of the shipments. So a London to Paris shipment, you'll put in the collection address, the delivery address, and then you can put in the method of transport. So whether it was road, sea, air, and then the weight as well of that movement. And then that will pump out the emissions of that individual movement for you. You can do the same with your tonnage of packaging, for example, and it will tell you how much carbon has been produced as a result of that packaging being produced. But also, I would say, as much as the calculator is fantastic, Google is also great. So you can Google how what's the carbon emissions of 2 tons of cardboard, for example, and you can work out from that as well. So don't feel like you're tied to the calculator. I know Carol has just said, can you send the link to the calculator? I'm sure we can, but it's on, if you go on Google and you type in Gallery Climate Coalition carbon calculator, or even just go on the Gallery Climate Coalition website, it comes up, and I think it's a box on the right hand side that you can click. And it's really good.
Yeah.
I can't take credit for it because we didn't make it, but it's really good.
Yes, well, the GCC team. Oh, look, Emma posted it. So if anyone would like to save that, but I'm sure we'll also kind of include it in the post ArtEvolve materials. Mm-hmm. So let's talk a little bit about things you decided not to do.
Yeah.
After your audit. So when you were creating your reduction plan, you made the decision not to offset emissions from shipments, which will probably surprise some people. So tell us a little bit about that.
That was quite controversial, I think. And we decided not to offset because all of the conversations we were having with these specialists or the kind of companies that I spoke about earlier, and Danny and the Gallery Climate Coalition, were teaching me about offsetting because I didn't know a huge amount about it. And they were basically, every single person was saying that if you look at any of these offset programs, even the ones that are kind of verified and are supposedly the ones to go to, we need more rapid action or more rapid reductions in our emissions in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. That is actually going to make a change, rather than something where, so offsetting would, an easy example of offsetting would be planting trees and planting a certain amount of trees equivalent to how much carbon is produced. If you then sit and think about how long it takes for a tree to grow, and then it to actually start pulling that carbon out of the planet, or kind of out of the atmosphere is probably a better way of putting it, that's a long time. And it's much longer than 5 to 10 years. And if we're working in line with the Paris Agreement to reduce our carbon emissions by 2025 by 50%, offsetting isn't going to do that for us. And it also felt like the easy option, or maybe the one that everyone was going for. And I don't know, it just didn't sit necessarily well with me to just go down the offsetting route. So we decided not to do that. But what we did decide to do is, and it's similar, it's not like groundbreakingly different, but we decided to donate to an organization called Client Earth, which I'm sure a lot of people on this call would have already heard of already. And they fund policy change. So what Client Earth do, and I'm sure anyone who's interested can go and have a look on their site, but you can donate to them, and they are a body or an organization that basically lobbies the government to change policy to force businesses to be much more environmentally friendly. And all of the recommendations we got from kind of all of these experts that are much more qualified than I am were basically recommending that that is kind of what was now considered a better option. So that's what we went with. And because we now calculate the emissions of every single shipment, we then at the end of the month tot up how much carbon has been produced, and then we as our own kind of organization fund or donate to Client Earth that specific amount that is based on a carbon factor of the carbon produced. And a London School of Economics paper was released that basically tells you what you can work, the amount you need to donate based on the carbon produced. Again, we can share that in a follow-up email as well with the link to that info as well. That's what we decided to do rather than offsetting.
Yeah. So, I think that particularly as the climate change movement comes more into the kind of corporate capitalistic space, I think it's important for us as consumers, but also as businesses, to be aware that sometimes there is, what we can call greenwashing that happens, So like with offsetting, for example, right now, if you go to Ryanair and you buy a flight for you, you have the option to offset your carbon, but what are they actually doing to offset your carbon? We don't know.
And then you also, you click that offset button and you're like, okay, great, I'm being green now. It's all sorted. It's all fine. Fixed. But then like Danny used the example with me for the trees and then the 5 to 10 years. And I think when you sit and think about that, like for me, that was okay, offsetting isn't the answer here. And I know there's so many more projects that are offsetting projects as well. You can fund pretty much anything that you want to that can be an offsetting project in some form. I think we even found one that was to do with fitting people more economical cookers or something bizarre. So we just didn't think that was the right fit for us. But I think we did with Client Earth. There's a report that I would also recommend people go have a look at. And it's by an arts charity called Julie's Bicycle. And that really easily and kind of in simple form explains why offsetting is probably not the answer for the art industry. And it's specifically focused for our industry. So go and have a look at that as well. I would definitely say to everyone, it's called Julie's Bicycle.
Shout out to Julie's Bicycle. We know them well. Yeah. They're great. So yes, I think, we kind of definitely have to consider that we also have a very particular industry that may have particular needs that are a bit different.
And I think we also have a responsibility to take our own ownership of what we're doing. So I think, you've got the option on Ryanair to offset your flight, for example, and you click and then you pay a little bit extra to do that. And that, for me, passes the responsibility from Ryanair to you as a customer or someone flying. And I don't know whether that's necessarily, it's probably quite controversial, so we might get a lot of comments, but I don't know whether that's the right idea. And for ourselves at Queen's, we didn't want to do that. So we decided to absorb that cost, which it was quite not a tricky decision to make, but we had to make sure that it was the right decision for us and that it was viable. But otherwise, you just have some people saying they don't want to, some people saying they do, and then everything gets missed. Whereas I think it's much more simple to just say, okay, we're going to take ownership. This is what we're going to do. And that's how we operate now.
Well, and I think it's really easy to get bogged down in the details of these things, right? But if we kind of back out as an industry, and even not just the commercial art world, but the art world as a whole, and we just think, okay, if we don't do anything, what's going to happen? Well, all this artwork is going to be damaged anyway.
Yeah, no one's going to be here anymore.
Because of climate change. There's water and weather and all sorts of things. So yeah, I mean, I think sometimes it's good to kind of take that step back and remember why we're doing this, and it's to help, save the planet, but also help save the art on the planet.
I think as well, I think it would be really nice for people to come away from this webinar not feeling intimidated about completing a carbon audit, because it sounds horrible, and I don't think it necessarily needs to be, as long as you're doing and collecting as much information as you can, and realizing that, I'm assuming a lot of people on this call aren't kind of environmental specialists, and it's probably not also their core role. So kind of accepting that you're moving in the right direction and you're trying, and if we all work together, we'll eventually get there, hopefully as soon as possible. But that would be a good outcome, I think, from this call, is just to kind of get going and start kind of what you can.
Well, and I think like what you said before about choosing just one aspect to focus on, to do sort of like a mini audit on just packaging or just energy, maybe the one that's most accessible to you. So you know that you have all of the energy bills for the past year are sitting in a folder somewhere. You could go do that, right? That's something that's more easy to access, especially.
Yeah, I mean, I think our energy bills was the easiest part for us, because it's all listed right there on the bills that you have. That was, I mean, you could do that this evening if you want to. It's that easy. Then I think work with your shippers and work with your logistics partners, because if they want to also kind of work in the right direction, and hopefully they do, they'll help you with pulling all the information for your audit as well, because they already have it. We were lucky, I think. Slightly different maybe for a gallery.
Right. So let's see, just going over to our Q&A section now. Eliana says, it's GCC website. She's asking what that is. So it's the Gallery Climate Coalition website that has this calculator that we're talking about on it. So we will definitely make sure that, that gets shared. Then Deborah says, when you were doing the part of the audit about the warehouse, did you take into account the, embodied carbon for building the building?
No, so that's something we didn't build the building, and it was around before we were around. We could have done, and I think that extends into probably a wider conversation around, you've kind of got 3 levels of what you can include in your carbon audit, and you can include kind of your own, then kind of the emissions calculated by or produced by all of your suppliers. And then you can go like beyond that, another step as well. So we didn't, but we could have done if we wanted to, and maybe that's something we can include next time.
Yeah.
I don't know how we'd go about calculating that, actually, though, thinking about it.
So let's see, Eric has a great question, which is, so assuming the first audit always takes the longest, do you have an estimate of how much you think it would take to do a second one? Because you're thinking of doing it yearly, right?
Yeah, I think, well, for us, it will probably be just as long the second time around, because we'll be doing the full year. And we'll probably make a few changes just based on our own processes. So we might split it out and do me doing one section, another person in our team doing another. So I'd say I'm going to allow roughly the same time. But I can imagine if you do it again, you could probably even halve that time because you'll have all the templates set up. And also, as the year goes, you'll know what information you need to keep storing. So you'll know to have all your utility bills saved in one folder and all your shipments saved in another. And I think once you kind of know what information to look out for, you start collecting it. And the collecting it was the hardest bit for us, not the inputting it, because I'm not the only person in the organization. So I need to speak to whoever manages our utilities. And then I need to speak to whoever's ordering our crates and whoever's packaging X, Y, Z. So once you've kind of know that, and once you kind of know who to go to or you know what you're collecting, I can imagine it being much, much quicker.
Yeah, that's true. I think if you start to plan your kind of organization of those materials in advance, then it's just a matter of pulling them at that point.
And even like right now, you could say to your logistics partner, can you include from now on all of the carbon emissions for any of our shipments? If they're not doing already, you might find that it's already on there. But yeah, it's quite easy to do.
Yeah, definitely. So let's see, Louise. I might need some more clarification on this question, Louise. So I hope you're around and can pop into the comments. So Louise has said, so a comparable standard would be to take in account all emissions from scope 1 and 2. I'm not sure what he's referring to.
So that's referring to, I think, what I was mentioning around taking in your own emissions versus like your supplier's emissions. That would be scope 1 and 2, but what's the question?
It says a comparable standard, I guess comparable to what you did, maybe?
Yeah, so we took into account kind of the emissions produced from like our packaging that we'd ordered, for example, but we didn't take into account, the building of our vehicles or kind of whatever that would be. So maybe ours wasn't completely scope 2. I'd say we took into account maybe 50% of scope 2 that we had the information to readily at hand. We probably could next time, and maybe this is a great option, is actually start to think about all the materials that went into producing our fleet of vehicles. That would be really interesting. I don't know where we'd start, but I'm sure there's some answers somewhere. So yeah, effectively, I'd say maybe a more accurate representation of what we did is scope 1 and probably 50 to 70% of scope 2.
Yeah. And probably the more, let's see if I can phrase this right. So the temporary items in scope 2, the things you were kind of going through more quickly, like packaging and things like that, right? Things that
so packaging, I mean, we go through very quickly. So for us, it was quite clear that was something that we would need to work on or would need to look at how we could change quite quickly. Whereas obviously our vehicles, that's something we have for a long time. What I would say actually really interestingly about vehicles is we looked quite extensively into electric. And the current thought process, or at least from the people we spoke to, is that actually as fantastic as electric is, and it's definitely got its pros for, say, movements in and around London, short kind of movements, maybe to storage, to a gallery, for example, you can also start to consider the full lifetime of an electric vehicle from when that battery is being produced for the electric vehicle, and then the full life cycle of that electric vehicle, and then disposal of that battery. And I think there's maybe, I'm not a car expert, so don't shout at me in the comments, but I think there's maybe some questions at the moment around how much better an electric vehicle is in the full life cycle. But I don't know the answer. So we didn't get to the end, but I think that would be really interesting as well to kind of maybe understand more about that.
Yeah, definitely. And Juliana, where to find the carbon reduction plan? It is on the Queen's Fine Art website, but we'll make sure.
Yeah, we can send a link out to that. That's no problem.
And then let's see, Imogen says, with your extended network, how do you ensure that all your vehicles and packing standards are unified globally?
So we are quite lucky. So with all our vehicles that we have in the UK, we know obviously completely everything about those. With the agents that we work with, say in another kind of art hub, we've selected a very tight knit kind of roster of agents that we have, I guess would be the right word. So we work with ones that we have a really strong relationship with. So we were able just to kind of reach out and get information from them. And then by looking at those two, we could standardize that quite easily.
Okay. So I guess, so in that case, you included the data from your agents as well.
So if it was like a shipment that was going, say, for example, from London to New York, and it was a air freight, that's slightly tricky. We had to use the Gallery Climate Coalition's calculator to understand what that would be. But if it was say a movement from London to Paris, and it was our vehicle that had driven over there, and then our some agents, technicians were installing a work within a client's home in Paris, and they were using different materials, then we factor that in there based on what they tell us. So it was a bit of both, depending on what it was.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm sure that must be a bit of a challenge too, to kind of do that coordination with agents. So, and also I'm sure that will be the case for any gallery or museum that use more than one shipper, right?
Yeah, I can imagine so, because they'll all have different materials that they use. I mean, you've got ones that are standardized like card and polythene film and things, but they might use different weights of card. I don't know. There's probably slight differences. But again, just broadly make assumptions with the most information that you have available, because then at least you're kind of going in the right direction.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that's about it. Imogen, if you have any more questions, feel free to reach out and we can get you connected to the people. But what I would first do is just check out the GCC calculator, because I think a lot of those questions that you have here are going to be answered on there. So yeah, well, this was a really great session today. Thank you so much, James, for joining us and talking through your audit and your carbon reduction plan, and being so transparent about it, which is wonderful. So
no problem. If anyone's got any questions, I mean, feel free to just reach out to us directly as well. I mean, my email is jamesq@queensfineart.co.uk. So you can just email me with any questions you've got, and I'll do my best to help, or find someone else that knows the answer. So hopefully that will help.
And Deborah says, I've been to a lot of these sessions. This is probably the best one. Thank you very much.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, thanks, Deborah. Well, thank you, everybody. And yeah, our goal here at ArtEvolve is to make it so you can actually do the things we talk about and not just talk about them some more, right? So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, James, for joining us. And we will see you all in a couple of weeks for our wrap-up discussion of COP26. So keep an eye out for that.
Great. See you all soon.
Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye.